So I'd like to welcome everybody to the latest Sustainable Practices for Wisconsin Printers webinar, Options for Difficult to Recycle Materials. I'd like to first talk about the program sponsors. It's Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources, the Green Tier program, the SGP program, FTA, Great Lakes Graphics Association, SGIA, and TLMI. Your moderator is myself, Joe Lyman. I'm president of the Great Lakes Graphics Association. We represent all sorts of printers, converters, packagers, tag and label manufacturers throughout the three-state region, Illinois, Indiana, and Wisconsin. A little bit about the webcast logistics before we get started. All attendees are muted so that we have the best possible way of limiting background noise. If you have a question or a comment, you can always use the submit chat feature on the right-hand side of your frame, and I will unmute myself to ask the question, and questions can always be asked at the end of the program. This webcast is being recorded, and you will receive the recording within the next few days. And then we'll send out more information about not only this webinar, but also information about the Green Tier and SGP program after the webinar. A little bit about today's agenda. We'll do a welcome and introductions. We'll talk a little bit about the Sustainable Green Printing Partnership, the Green Tier program. We'll do an overview of difficult to recycle waste streams, including flexible packaging and label materials. We'll do a case study from Outlook Group and Label Matrix and Convergent Energy Label Matrix program. And then we'll finish with questions and answers. At this time, I'd like to ask Gary Jones from SGIA/SGP to talk a little bit about the double benefits for Wisconsin printers with the Green Tier program and the SGP program.
Oh, thanks, Joe, and good afternoon, everyone. And thank you so much for attending our webinar. We're very excited to have you come and share the next hour or so, 60 minutes with us to talk about a very important topic in terms of struggles that printing members have with some of the waste streams and what an excellent option is for them to address that. And I know you're going to enjoy the program. The one thing I wanted to take time right now is to talk about Green Tier and SGP for just a short, brief introduction to both programs. And really, the programs are complementary of each other. The Green Tier program is a program that's run by the state of Wisconsin. It's a recognition program that it's a voluntary program. By the way, both programs are voluntary, but it recognizes superior environmental performance. And companies that are seeking the designation under Green Tier, there's different levels and different layers of recognition, are able to get several benefits. One is you get a dedicated contact person with the DNR. You have DNR liaison. You have regulatory flexibility, and depending upon what level of Green Tier you get into, there's some streamlined permits. In fact, there's a really good streamlined permit that's now been issued and made available to the Green Tier participants. And then reduce costs, risk, and liability, and of course, you get recognition as being a Green Tier participant. Then the Sustainable Green Printing Partnership is a certification program, sustainability certification program that looks at your operations. It's not a product certification. It's really a manufacturing operations certification program that was created by the printing industry for the printing industry, but it remains independent of any of the printing trade associations. In other words, it's its own entity. Again, the SGP program allows you to meet customer demand for sustainable supply chain, reduces your operational costs, same as the Green Tier, because it makes you look for things to opportunities to reduce your environmental impact and have a positive return on your investment for your activities. And then, of course, we have the Scp Impact Tracker, which allows you to monitor and illustrate your progress. And it's basically, think of it as a dashboard that you can share with your customers, share with your employees, share with your stakeholders. There's two websites right there. Also, because of the partnership that the printing industry has enjoyed with the Wisconsin DNR, through our printer charter under the green tier, we've been able to come up with criteria that allow facilities to get certified under green tier if they're SGP certified, and likewise, if you're green tier certified, you can get certified under SGP with very little effort. So the two programs are extremely complementary, and we encourage you to take the time when you get a chance to explore both of them and reach out to us if you have any questions. Okay, Joe, back to you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Gary. At this time, I'd like to introduce our speakers today. First is Roz Bandy, Vice President of Sustainability for TLMI. And Roz is the Vice President at TLMI. She's worked in the field of sustainability for 15 years, primarily in packaging and labels. She currently leads the sustainability efforts for TLMI, the U.S. Trade Association for the label industry. Much of what she does is educational, helping members sort through what it means to reduce impacts on the environment while helping their customers do the same. Welcome, Roz. The next is Ted Hanson. Ted is the CEO of Convergent Energy in Green Bay, Wisconsin. Ted has worked for Convergent Energy since the startup in 2009. Ted's education is in chemical engineering, and prior to joining Convergent Energy, he worked for Kimberly-Clark and Aston Johnson, producing tissue, nonwovens, and paper machine clothing. In his current role, Ted oversees the Green Bay fuel pellet manufacturing operations and the Lons Warden Electric Company in Lons, Michigan. Convergent Energy has been providing an alternative to landfill for over 10 years, and they divert over 450,000 tons of non-recyclable material from landfills since their inception. Finally, I'd like to introduce Danielle Jurjewski. Danielle is the Business Development Manager, Outlook Group, LLC. She drives growth opportunities to Outlook Group by creatively combining their resources across printed labels, flexible packaging, folding cartons, and zero-distance contact packaging management. Outlook is a leader in environmental impact reduction, so she and her team has delivered packaging and services that support their customers in realizing their own environmental goals. They navigate the journey of sustainable stewardship together with their end users, formulating a comprehensive plan for impact reduction with material downgauging, landfill avoidance partnerships, material selection consulting, and roadmap execution. Thank you, speakers, for presenting today. And at this time, I turn it over to Roz.
Hey, everybody. I want to talk a little bit about landfill and why avoiding landfill is important to consider. Next slide. So when we send materials to the landfill, primarily organic materials, which includes paper, as those materials break down, they create methane. And you'll notice that, if you ever have an opportunity to drive by a landfill, that sometimes they have little streams of fire, torches, it almost looks like, called flaring. And those things can reduce some of the emissions into the air. And some landfills also have a methane capture function where they can use methane for energy. But the problem is that while landfills can measure all of the methane that's collected, they can't measure all of the methane produced and what leaks into the air. So if you look at that pie chart on the left, you'll see that landfills are one of the largest methane emitters in the U.S. And accounts for about 16% by this 2017 data. And that's just behind natural gas and petroleum systems at 31% and enteric fermentation at 27%. And you get major kudos if you know what enteric fermentation is. It's actually the gas produced by cows as they ferment grass in their stomachs and burp. And that's how many cows we have in this country. And so, you know, behind landfills is coal mining and manure management. So it's really a significant amount of methane emissions that landfills produce. And, you know, by the time the landfills are finished, are filled and sealed, most of that methane has already been released. So reducing methane, one of the ways we can do that is by reducing the amount of organics going into the landfill. Next slide. This is a fantastic website if you're interested in learning more about landfills. It's called SWEEP, Solid Waste Environmental Excellence Protocol, and they keep a running tally on all of the landfills in the United States. And as you can see here, this is a chart indicating the landfill capacity in 2021 and how that capacity is being reduced. And so you can see the Northeast is very significant with remaining capacity of just 8 years. And if you look at the Midwest, where you all are located, where Wisconsin is located, there's about 11% or 11 years left, and a 4% reduction in capacity every single year. So it's very, very difficult to get all of the permits to establish a new landfill. So the picture is landfills are really disappearing, and so alternatives and considering alternatives is very important. Next slide. So when you think about an alternative to a landfill, waste to energy or energy waste turned into fuel pellets and then used for energy is a real complementary option to landfill, but it does have its limitations. And the reason why I say this is because the best option is recycling and redesigning materials that can be recycled or using materials that can be recycled. But we all know that in our industries, that is often very difficult to do. So just some key points here. Using waste for energy generation is not considered recycling. It's not considered zero waste. Zero waste is when all materials are reused or recycled and those molecules stay in motion. It's not considered to be part of the circular economy as designed by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, where products are designed to be turned into new products. It's also not a renewable resource, but it should be used for non-recyclable materials only. It has far fewer emissions than landfills, and this waste management hierarchy is really your guide. So preventing waste is your first option, reducing material waste, then recycling, then recovery, including waste to energy, and then lastly, disposal in a landfill. And in the label industry where I work, we work with materials, label materials that have multiple laminates, which can't be separated and recycled. We have adhesive, we have paper, we have film, sometimes paper, film, and adhesive all together. So very difficult to recycle that material. And so many of our TLMI members choose to send that material to waste to energy. We are currently looking at some other alternatives for this material. It's kind of the jury is out right now, but using this material in composite lumber is one option that we're looking into. But as a final word, you know, look at the waste management hierarchy. Do everything you can to recycle the items that you can, or changing to materials that can be recyclable. But for what's left over that can't be recycled, waste to energy or pellet, fuel pellets for energy, is really a complementary option to recycling. And I think that is it for me, Joe.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Danielle?
Good afternoon. I hope everybody can hear me okay. This is Danielle. I'm with Outlook Group, and I am here to share a little bit about our journey and landfill avoidance success. So the picture here is just a part of our team. We were awarded a Wisconsin Business Friend of the Environment Award last year by the Wisconsin Manufacturers Group based in Madison. Our journey as a company started about a decade ago. When you walk around our facility now, it's very much a culture. Putting things in the right bin is just something that we do. So it's deeply embedded in our employees' actions. It is what we it's what we breathe, it's what we do. If we can find a place for something, we will. Peer leadership, so when we onboard new employees, they're given a rundown on the materials that they might be handling in their area of our operations, and they're shown how to put those in the right places so that we can recycle them or send them out for waste to energy. And peer pressure helps too. There's definitely a lot of passionate people throughout our office and on our manufacturing plant who, will definitely say, hey, that can doesn't go in that bin. You've got to take it over there. And our journey started as a combination of passion and wanting to do the right thing and evaluating opportunities to save costs when our company experienced an increase in landfill costs when we started this about a decade ago. Next slide, please. So we have 0 dumpsters outside of our plant. We have quite a large facility. We have a number of materials that flow through our workspace. We're at about 95 to 98% landfill avoidance. And how did we get there? So a little bit more about how we got there. You can jump to the next slide, please. So we are a manufacturer of flexible packaging. So we're laminating films in our facility and printing them. We're manufacturing labels. We actually do make some of our own adhesive structures. And we also buy large rolls like many other label manufacturers and cut those out. So film, paper, adhesive, silicone, sometimes some metallized layers in between there on our flexible packaging side. We do have a paperboard division, so we've got a lot of fiber. We do some contract packaging, so while we have a good volume of fiber that has a lot of printing ink on it, we also have a significant volume that doesn't have ink. So what our teams did is they made a list of all of these different materials that flow through our plant. They created an estimate of the volumes associated with those and started reaching out to local vendors that could take those away instead of our waste hauler. So we have all kinds of resources for all the different materials. The image you're seeing is just one of our many sorting stations. This one happens to be in our label area. I would say just over 50% of the material that could be considered waste that goes out of our door is label and film associated with flexible packaging and pressure sensitive labels and shrink labels. And then the rest of that percentage is a combination of paperboard and other. You can jump to the next slide, please. This is another 2 images of different sorting stations. Again, 2 stations that are also located in our label area. We have probably more than 15 different sorting stations throughout our facility. We kind of have our 3 major locations for paperboard, flex, and label. Then we have our different clean rooms for contract packaging. And each of those department supervisors has their own kind of management of these materials going through their different areas. Still, the kind of boxes and the sorting concept remains the same. The differences are just in some of the different materials that may be flowing through their department as opposed to another department. But I think the key here is making it easy and making it nearby and making it very clear to the people on the floor, so they have a place to go with those things without, taking them too far away from the equipment that they're responsible for running. Next slide, please. Can you maybe,
Sorry.
Yeah, there we go. Okay. So I think this is another important slide too. I wanted to make sure that the audience here could see into the bins that we have. So while we do have Convergyn as a very important vendor for us to take away and find an alternative to landfill for our films and pressure sensitive materials, we do have a long list of other materials flowing through our plants. We have one key vendor that supports us with a lot of these different materials. The reason we sort them is because it gives these materials a higher value in the selling market after it leaves our facility and moves into our haulers facility. So you can see there's junk cores there, there's ink buckets there, plastic ink buckets, PET bands. Close to the far right, we have a bin of film. That is a bin of film that would be going into that box, into our trucks to Convergyn. And we'll show you in the next slide how our label material is going there. And then recently, actually, it was towards the end of last year, we had one of our operators asking about where they could put aerosol cans. They had recently seen something on the news about how those shouldn't be going into standard recycling. And so now we have a couple of locations throughout our plant where we have aerosol cans and where those can be properly disposed. So the key here is, having a vendor sorting appropriately so that the value remains high for these different materials. Usually that vendor would direct you in how to sort them. And then we have backups to our backups. So we have, a good, strong list of vendors that primarily take our materials. And if for some reason there's something going on in the marketplace with capacity or demand, we do have other companies we can call to help us so we can maintain our diversion percentage. Next slide, please. So again, Convergyn Energy is an extremely valuable partner for Outlook Group. We have been partners for a decade. When we did find Convergyn, they were in their early years. We might be one of their first partners, and we're really grateful now that they are fully vertically integrated and have somewhere to take those fuel pellets to. I do have a circle on the left photo there where you can see how we are stripping our matrix waste off of one of our label presses. And on the right, you can see more closely how that material is being pulled up and into a vacuum system. And that vacuum system, we have this on every single one of our label machines. We do not have this kind of equipment on our other assets for paperboard and flex. So this is specific to label. These vacuum machines are pulling that waste. We have one central area, if you want to jump to the next slide, where this material is being pulled into, and it's being pulled into a compactor. So we do have a compactor. We made that investment very early on in our decision to move into a landfill diversion option. So we are compacting our label material. We do have a baler. And so we are filling, I'm told, about a truckload a day with a combination of label material that's been compacted, label material that is in Gaylords, the paperboard Gaylords that you see on the left there, one of our one of our employees, rolling that into the collection area. And that is how we get our label and film material over to conversion. The bottom left photo is showing you an image of some of our paperboard material. What our team does on the paperboard side, so we are recycling all of our paperboard material. All of our films and laminated adhesive structures are going into waste to energy. So we do have very clear different streams going with different vendors there. We do sort our paperboard into fiber that has a lot of ink on it versus fiber that has little to no ink on it. Our partner takes that and is able to find higher dollar value with the material that already has not as much ink on it. You can see a roll of Gaylords there. We do have people that go into the different departments, collect that material, and bring it back to this centralized area. You can go to the next slide, please. And this is just an image here. You can see on the left is our compactor there. And on the right, we have trucks. We have a special area with 4 beds for trucks where we collect all of the different waste streams from our plant. So we have the different sorting stations. Then those sorting stations are moved into this main recycling and collection area. And then we fill the trucks for our different vendors based on the materials that they're willing to accept and how they accept them. So the image here is a truck of paperboard that's getting packed up and ready to go. Next slide, please. I think just to follow in line with what Rosalind had started with, first and foremost, we're doing as much work with our vendors as possible, our material suppliers, to reduce the amount of waste before entering our facility in the first place. Most of our large material suppliers have exact width programs, so we follow material guidance and order that whenever we can. We do have very strong operational teams that are doing continuous work on reducing the amount of waste in our own production. And we do have continuous improvement teams and employees that are heavily engaged in finding ways to improve. And the aerosol can suggestion is one that we were able to happily implement after a suggestion at our town hall meeting last year. And just lastly, I think more so than ever in the last 12 to 18 months, we have had our customers and prospects really be eager to learn more about how we're doing what we're doing, especially because we do have so many different types of materials flowing through our plant. So we are finding market value and penetration into new business by sharing the status of our landfill avoidance and trying to help our customers continue that avoidance through the supply chain. And that concludes what I have to share.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Danielle. This time I'd like to have Ted present.
All right. Hey, thanks, Danielle. Appreciate it. We've certainly enjoyed working with Outlook and appreciate the work that they've put into getting their materials packaged and delivered to us, and it's worked out quite well. So just a little overview of conversion. We have if you go to the next slide, please. Our corporate motto is that we are producing renewable fuels and power for sustainable businesses. And so we are, as others have said, that we're taking non-recyclable industrial byproducts that would otherwise go to the landfill, and we're turning it into a fuel pellet that's then burned either at the power plant up in Lons, Michigan, or we have other customers that have solid fuel boilers that convert this material into either electricity or steam. So yeah, if you go to the next slide. So the types of materials we take, again, it's all industrial byproducts. There's no post-consumer waste that we can take, and that's for environmental permitting reasons for our customers who are using our product. And we take a variety of matrix waste, flexible film, non-recyclable papers. There's a lot of silicone-coated papers. We've got the papers with high wet strength, you know, shop towel type materials, some that have high ink loading so that they can't really be bleached very well in pulpers. Some of the thermal paper. There's just a lot of paper out there that is not recyclable for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it's just laminated to other materials. And then we do take some forms of nonwovens depending on the properties of the nonwovens. So we take a little bit of everything in a lot of different forms, as you can see in some of the pictures here. And we take those materials and we blend them and turn them into what we would describe as an engineered fuel that has properties that are required for our customers to meet their air permits that they have in place for burning a product like this. Next slide, please. So this is what I would refer to as our circular economy. I know Roz's definition from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation would not say this is a circular economy, but we consider it to be a circular economy, and that is we're taking the materials and we're converting them into a pellet. You can see the pellets in the upper right corner being loaded into one of the trucks, and then those trucks are delivered just as coal or wood chips or any other type of solid fuel would be delivered to a boiler, and then they go to the power plant where the power plant produces electricity that can then in turn be either sent to the grid for electricity or could even be sold back to a manufacturer to make more of their industrial byproducts. So that's kind of the economy that we're working on, and how that circular economy plays out kind of in our world. Next slide. So I just wanted to highlight a couple things of how customers are really doing what Danielle showed you, and you know, she's talking about the benefits they get. It used to be when we were starting up 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, it seemed like a lot of our customers were talking about renewable options, sustainable options, things like that, and those terms are still being used. But we're finding we're hearing more and more from Walmart, Procter & Gamble, Dow Chemical, from large companies. They're talking more and more about the circular economy and circular solutions. And, you know, I think one of the challenges with renewable is it can be a little bit of an arbitrary definition. What does it really mean to be renewable? Whereas with circular, it's a little easier to define, it's a little easier to measure, and it's easier to show customers and suppliers kind of how they fit into all of it. So we really like talking about the circular solutions, and it seems like more and more folks are going in that direction. Next slide. The other one, we are seeing more and more people, I mean, it used to be we had to go to customers and offer them a cost savings in order for them to consider sending product to us. And we still find that to be the case, but we find that our customers are really hitting these environmental challenges head on and not pushing them aside or ignoring them. And I really like, this is a good example, the Alliance to End Plastic Waste is a group of plastic manufacturers and consumer products companies that have really tackled the ocean plastics issue head on, and they've created a website called endplasticwaste.org. And they're really getting out in front of it and kind of admitting, hey, we've got a problem. The problem is not plastics, the problem is plastics disposal, and we need to find solutions and we need to reuse these plastics. And they're getting out ahead of it. And I kind of put in parentheses there, rather than waiting for someone to come out with the website www.eliminateplastics.org, instead they're saying endplasticwaste.org. And I think that's just a proactive way. That's a proactive way to address the problem up front. So next slide, please. So here is another good example. I just wanted to pull out to show how people are extracting value from doing other things, creative things with their waste. This is from a Procter & Gamble website where they have a product called a Fairy Ocean detergent or soap of some sort. And they're advertising that, hey, you know, we're trying to deal with ocean plastics, and this bottle is made from 10% ocean plastics and 90% post-consumer recycled plastic. And I think what they're doing is they're taking a problem and they're hitting it head on, and then they're turning it into an opportunity. And, you know, it may be adding some cost to that, what is probably a very small product line in their company, but they're able to use that to start changing their behaviors in the company. It sets a very positive direction for what they're trying to do. And I think in many ways, those increased costs are probably being rolled into just their marketing budget. They can use this to really advertise throughout their company and with their customers some of the proactive steps they're taking. So again, I'm just trying to show that there are benefits to our customers bringing these materials to us compared to landfilling that they're really able to leverage and extract value in other areas than just looking at the landfill costs. Next slide, please. So getting to the direct costs, though, we find that landfill costs for our customers vary widely, depending on the form that the waste is in, depending on how far they have to ship the waste to their nearest landfill, depending on the competition in their area for landfilling. And so there's just a lot of factors that go into this, but what we find is that when our customers really dig into what their true costs are for landfilling, it often surprises them how much they're really paying. It's not just the cost that the landfill is charging at the gate, but there's a lot of other factors that go into it. And so I just wanted to highlight here some of our, little more of our extreme examples where people are hauling, or customers are hauling material from some fairly distant regions of the country. We have a supplier who is sending us their waste material in order to, their customers are requiring them to be landfill free, and they can actually ship the material to us from Southern California and save money over their local landfilling rates. Landfills in California are getting to be very challenging, and they're filling up fast. Same thing, several examples of some high landfill rate areas in Minnesota, and then also an example there from Chicago. So we get materials from all over. We actually have a couple suppliers in the Massachusetts area. So those folks are able to extract the value out of doing the right thing, which is keeping the material out of the landfill and creating solutions that really contribute to what they're promoting as their circular economy. Next slide. So we kind of joke that we call ourselves planes, trains, and automobiles. We try to accommodate our raw material suppliers as much as possible, and we take the materials in whatever form that they're in. So as Danielle highlighted, sometimes it's in a Gaylord box, sometimes it's in a bale, sometimes it's in a compactor. We try to accommodate our customers as much as possible. So we have a pretty flexible receiving process that can handle materials in all shapes and forms. When you start getting out into longer distances, 75 miles or more probably, it really helps to have the materials compacted and baled. And we find many of our customers are able to install some sort of a baler, and it usually has a return that is attractive to their company. And it really helps, helps simplify their process for getting the materials to us. There's three primary things that we're trying to avoid. We also joke that dumpsters talk to people who are carrying metal and convince them to throw that metal into the dumpsters. We are trying to avoid metal. So engine blocks, anything big and heavy, we really try to avoid. It's hard on our shredding systems. We also cannot take post-consumer waste, so break room waste, bathroom waste. Things like batteries, we've had issues where batteries go through shredders, and when they get shredded, they generate a lot of heat. And so we're always trying to avoid batteries and hazardous or flammable materials for a variety of reasons. And then thirdly, really one of the challenges that I think for some of your folks that are working on innovation and packaging materials, we're always trying to avoid chlorinated materials such as PVC, saran, anything that's got chlorine attached to it. So we've had customers that have had to re-engineer some of their packaging to try to get the chlorinated materials out. And I know that can be a challenge and it can take a while, but we're seeing more folks doing that. But when you combust chlorine, it forms hydrochloric acid, and that is something that's highly regulated in our customers' air permits. So that's why we're always watching HCl closely. Next slide. So our fuel, just to give you a little background on our fuel, it can be blended with pretty much any solid fuel. And we have customers burning 100% pellets, or we have them mixing in 10%. Just depends on their boiler and what it's designed to do. And I'd just like to touch on something real quick. People often ask us, well, you have plastics in your fuel. Isn't it bad to burn plastics? And I would just like to say that when you burn plastics in a campfire, if you throw a styrofoam cup or a water bottle in your campfire and you see the black smoke coming out, the reason for that is because a campfire is cold, relatively cold combustion, and it lacks oxygen. And so the black that you see is unburned carbon, which is not good for the environment, and it's not something I would recommend you do. But when you take a plastic that contains polypropylene, polyethylene, polyester, nylon, styrofoam, these are long chains of carbon and hydrogen. And when you burn them at a high temperature with the right amount of oxygen, they burn extremely clean. They burn almost as clean as a natural gas or a woody biomass. And so the exception to that are materials like PVC pipe, the V being vinyl, polyvinyl chloride, or any type of vinyl materials. We screen our materials before they come to our plant very carefully to make sure we're not getting materials that have high chlorination levels. We are considered to be a renewable fuel in Wisconsin, Ohio, and Michigan. So anybody burning our fuel earns 100% renewable energy credits. And so the renewable status is typically defined and controlled by each state if they have a renewable portfolio standard. And because our fuel has an identical carbon footprint to woody biomass, we've been able to get a 100% renewable fuel designation in those 3 states. We haven't tried to get it in any other states, so far we've got a 100% success rate on that. And it is considered a non-waste fuel, and it's not incineration, and it is because this is an engineered fuel that is very clean burning. We have one facility right now, and that's in Green Bay, and we can take over 100,000 tons per year of materials, and as was mentioned earlier, we've processed or diverted over 450,000 tons from Wisconsin and other state landfills since we started up. So with that, I think that's the end. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Ted. But this time I'd like to ask for questions for the presenters. Actually, we have several here. Danielle, you're still with us, correct?
Yes, I'm here.
Excellent. We have a question for you. What methods do you use to engage employees and management to become champions with your program for sustainability?
Yeah, good question. I think I would just go back to the peer leadership and peer pressure. So it's a little bit of a stick and a little bit of a carrot. When we have new employees starting on their tour, at a basic level, they're shown the different collection areas that we have in the break rooms. And then for their specific department, their supervisor and their training lead are explaining to them the materials that they're going to be working with and the locations where they should be put as opposed to where they should not be put. That's really kind of the way that it goes. It sounds simple. I think when I talk to my people now, so many people have been doing it for so long. It really is just what we do. You know, same as a horse always goes you know, into the barn at the right time. You know, our people are, you know, putting the materials in the place that they go. And if there is a hiccup, if somebody is putting it in the wrong spot, you know, our people are comfortable going over to each other and saying, hey, you know, this isn't where it goes, this is where it's supposed to be.
Excellent. I have another question for you. What are the economic benefits associated with your zero landfill program?
The economic benefits. So, yeah, so we kind of move over the years. We have either found ourselves to be cost neutral in comparison to landfill or saving money. And some of that just seems to be the ebb and flow with the marketplace and kind of what's going on with the value that some of our partners are able to send the materials to. You know, we are averaging about 5 tons a day shipping out for our label and flexible packaging waste. If we were sending that to landfill, we estimate that we would, you know, at least be spending 5 to 10% more.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Ted, I have a few questions for you. What are the types of materials that can be processed into fuel pellets?
Yeah, it's mostly flexible films, and assuming that it's not a chlorinated ink, the inks really don't matter. We can take metallized film. We typically try to avoid a film that's laminated to some sort of a foil, like a tin foil or something that's very heavy in metal. But the films are a big source for us. And then, you know, the label matrix, we can take the silicone backing material, we can take the labels themselves, and then butt roll materials. So a lot of times we'll get cores that are anywhere from, you know, 1 foot long to 6 feet long, and they may have an inch of plastic film wrapped around them, or some sort of a matrix material. And then a variety of tissue type products. We get a lot of what I call shop toweling, you know, materials that just for a variety of reasons are not recyclable. And then some nonwovens material, you know, diaper liners, baby wipe type materials. That can be a little challenging depending on the properties. The properties of that are all over the map, and some of it can be very tough to shred. So we kind of have to look at that on a case-by-case basis.
Excellent. Here's another question. What types of companies use your fuel that you produce, and then how cost competitive is it with other fuels that they're replacing?
Yep, good question. So it's anybody that has a solid fuel boiler technically can use this. There are some exceptions, but that's for the most part is the rule of thumb. So paper mills that are burning bark, coal, wood chips, they can take the product. There are universities that have coal-fired boilers or biomass boilers, they can take the product, and then also public utilities that are burning solid fuel. As far as pricing goes, it's all dependent on transportation, but assuming we're within a 150-mile radius of the power plant, we can usually be very competitive with natural gas and coal. And we do not get any subsidies. Unlike solar or wind, there are no subsidies. So we do have to compete with those prices. Kind of like everybody wants to do the right thing, but it needs to save them money. And so we find usually people want to see a savings compared to landfill, and they want to see a savings on fuel. And but we're able to compete with coal and natural gas. Excellent.
Finally, I have one last question. How do you screen the incoming materials that you receive for contaminants?
So one of the reasons we focus on industrial byproducts is because you all who are making those materials know exactly what's going into your process day in and day out, and it usually doesn't change all that much. So what we normally request is that a customer send us a sample. It can be a Ziploc bag, it can be a 5-gallon pail, it can be whatever quantity you really need, but we ask that it be a representative sample. In many cases, we look at the material and say, yep, we've seen that, done that, it's a great material, no problem. In other cases, we test it for chlorine if we don't know what it is or we're unsure. We'll test the samples. Once the samples are approved, then we'll ask for a test load. And again, that test load depends on how the waste is generated at the facility. It might be a Gaylord box, it might be a compactor load, it might be a full semi-load. And then we'll test the pellets that are made with that material. And then if all that looks good, then we give it a green light and say, okay, you can start delivering it. And then as we're producing the pellets, we're testing the pellets every 2 hours for chlorine and keeping a very close eye on that.
Excellent. I have one final question for you, Danielle. What type of company takes your empty ink containers?
I think we're probably referencing those plastic ink pails.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm told by my team that we have at least 2 vendors that take those, and they're vendors that are taking some of our other streams as well. So it's not just a company that's taking just that. They're taking, they are willing to take like PET bands and other plastics that we have, core plugs.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate everybody's time today. That's the last question, but I do want to give a special thank you to Ted, Roz, as well as Danielle for sharing their stories of sustainability. And again, you'll receive an email in the very near future for a survey. I'll just go to the next slide. For attendee survey, we'd like to understand your experience today. I've already had a few people say that they've really enjoyed the webinar today, but we'd like to find out what you think as well. So you'll receive an email talking a little bit about the SGP/Green Tier program. It'll also include the recorded seminar today, so you can share it with your co-associates and staff at your facilities. And finally, a survey to provide us with feedback on what we can do for the next ideas for the next webinar. So with that, I thank everybody for participating today, and I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.